But that was back before the basosphere condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere, where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles, and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
Sorry I'm so gloomy, but the gloom is half the mood. Welcome to the country where they throw out half the food. Like fuck you if you're hungry, we got better things to do. Got a million more priorities than human rights for you.
Just empty stomachs wandering an empty store, with shelves as empty as our craters left on distant shores. They mark the spot where once a country thrived that even tried to help its poor. Now in its place, a fascist state where rape is just a tool of war. I guess they took a page from out the book we used in '64. Villagers we stacked in graves, caked in fucking Agent Orange. Now cut to yesterday, Afghanistan endures the very storm that swept its way through Vietnam, where even now the blood is warm. And even now Fallujah celebrates to see a baby born who's not deformed, not warped by little presents we left hidden in the dirt, courtesy of all your friends at the World Economic Forum. Courtesy of civilized political decorum. Unity across the aisle, both sides agreeing via war crime quorum. I'd like to say that when they start the midterm texts, I'll be able to ignore them, but I know myself well enough to know I'm gonna draw them all rhetorically, then verbally I'll quarter them, lyrically I'll carpet bomb and mortar them, purely via metaphor I'll bury them alive, but upside down, with the utmost blasphemy intended out of spite. Now lyrically I'll lead them by the eyes, cause lyrically I'm still beneath the ice, scratching at the surface for a purpose they deny. And every time they smile and they look me in the eyes, suddenly I'm 6 feet under subprime. 6 feet standing firmly in between you and the sunrise. And now your movement's as restricted as the sunrise. Now it's crippled into parody like Occupy. Young hearts be free, young Turks, here to slowly poison hearts and minds. Here to get them speaking press release in record time. Here to get them standing up for AOC and every other Langley plant who sprays a coat of tax the rich across their Semper Fi. Now the skies are nice and clear, the drones are set to fly. They're following the pipeline of how the West was won to how the West declined, to how the West made debt into a genocide, to how the West demolishes a picket line, to how the West contaminates a riverside, to how the West's war crimes are glamorized, to how the West protects the kind of medical neglect that is infanticide at best and is at worst an ethnic cleansing rite. Now it's safe to say it's all fun and games until the feds arrive. Oh shit. last stand, and I came to deliver. Been called a Clinton operative, a Russian, and a grifter. By libs, a Washington student debt, proud to be an intern, sucking up to pigs who get a tax cut in the midterms. You cut the ties but never heal the wrist burns. Capitalist shackles wrap and penetrate like ringworms around the necks of those whose deaths will not affect the king's purse or the coffers of the company the king serves, who manufacture mandated tinctures. Their safety data hanging from a fixture, half a mile skyward, just dangling from the rafters. My grift is sobbing till I'm cackling with laughter. I guess I would have made a decent actor. I'd be great at crying on command until they cut plus 40 minutes after. When the director waves a hand, it ain't a rap, it's now a legal matter. Honey, my grift is weeping on a mic until I'm hacking up airstrike verses like it's bombs away and batter up. Swinging on these bigots, they keep killing us to fatten up. Kill the switch, eat the rich, I think they're finally fat enough. Grab your knife and fork, the world is yours, just say you've had enough. And if you're comfy, you could go ahead and laugh it up. Tell me how the most important vote I'll ever cast is like the choosing of a bus, in that it might not take you anywhere you want, but no one can deny the fact the bus is now no longer where it was. And that's the kind of progress we should celebrate and trust. Spoken like a kid who never took a bus. Spoken like a piece of shit that used some cash to mask his stink and truly thinks he's one of us. Spoken like a terminally unserious person who equates our cries for rights to mixed up orders from a server. It paints a privileged picture of what you would label urgent if the worst thing you've experienced in life has been the time your waiter accidentally brought a tray of gold flake scallop when you clearly ordered gold flake urchin. And now you're storming out the restaurant and hopping in a Tesla. You got 80 pounds of Tony Fauci merchant.
Rewind 2 chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind 2 chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Best to place your bets on weaponizing the identity of every limp progressive claiming grassroots integrity. Policy is a slippery slope for all of its complexity, so flex your brave resistance with this Ilhan Omar NFT. Numbered 1 of 723. Each depicts her valiantly championing a bill before she lays it at a donor's feet. And she can throw her hands up in the air with AOC and say if only Nina Turner could have voted present too, that's why we need another seat. We need some more progressives we elect to only tweet, who live to serve humana and their label of elective slapped on every patient's gravest needs. And every station plays the theme that medical professionals agree on the effectiveness and safety of injections authorized for this emergency. And in purely unrelated news, the profits of the ones who manufacture vaccines just increased by nearly 36 billion with a fucking B. Sometimes it feels like we're the only ones that see. Sometimes it feels like all of us are lost at sea. And every time we think we see an island on the tip of the horizon, it turns out to be another measure making sure we're kept within the watchful eye of murderous authority. And so I guess my grift is crying for the future they denied us, where the people who would buy us are a mockable minority. And we are more than genomes under warranty. And we are more than serfs in constant quarantine. If I had a single breath left, I'd let the chorus scream. I'd announce our leaders claiming none for all and more for me. None for all and more for
Just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good? And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously, we're fucked. We are fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Welcome if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News.
What's up, everybody? We're back. I know we took 2 weeks off, but we're here. It's Wednesday. That thing.
It is Wednesday, my dude.
This thing. We did it. We're here. Welcome to INN News. It's me, Reef Breland, with my co-host as always, Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear, and special guest Chanda Masta. What's up, Chanda? How are you? Trailer Park Pundit herself.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we'll try not to keep you too long. Anything we got to go over before we do stuff, Collin? To announce or we can get right into it.
No. We have a few long stories, so we probably should get into it. So, yeah, but we miss you guys. We love you guys. We've been away for a bit, as just playing catch up a little bit. Last week, Reef got evacuated due to a certain hurricane that missed you, basically.
Yep, pretty much it dissolved before it got here, mainly. Hey, man, I'm willing to play that gamble game. I'll take that, what Lady Luck gives me. I'm down for that. I'll take the not class 4 hurricane directly at me. I'm very much okay with that. But anyway, thing before we go into, right down there, scrolling across the screen, we got patrons now down there in the bottom. So appreciate you and all the other fans and members of the YouTube channel. It's nice to get people to pay us to keep doing what we're doing. We appreciate that.
It makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
A hell of a difference. I'll try to make sure to remember to check Rockfin and Rumble too, since we're on those platforms. So yell at me if I didn't read your thing. I will make sure to get to that. And that's gonna okay, cool. Let's get to it then. I'm down.
All right.
You brought some stories.
Yes. So I've been holding on to this story for weeks. We were going to do this before we took our brief break. But this is a great user-owned article related to Nigerian President Bola Tinubu. And there's some issue about him that people do not necessarily know. But prior to our break, we talked a lot about the coup in Niger and ECOWAS. And this guy is the chairman of ECOWAS. So there's some shadiness around him that kind of relates to his current deal with ECOWAS now and how he's directly affecting the coup in Niger right now. So we're going to get into him in a bit. Also, you get a good refresher about what's happening regarding the coup and ECOWAS. And then this is a story that was shared to me by Online Mutual. We talked a bit about BRICS. I guess we can call it BRICS Plus now, since there are more countries that are added to the alliance. That's Modi with the back turned with Macron. But we've had our, as much as we like BRICS, we also have our issues with it too. And we're going to get into it as to why. But there may be some alliances among, well, with Modi that he has one foot in terms of being a part of BRICS, and another foot in terms of being a part of the West. So, so I'm going to get into that. Hopefully I do this story a little justice, because there's a lot more information regarding this that I don't necessarily have, and I'm trying to currently get more information about. So
yeah,
we'll probably hear more about this in relation to Modi and India within hopefully soon.
Next few weeks, probably.
We're going to talk about, hopefully. But Algeria has been affected by this ultimately. So we're going to talk about that, how Algeria was affected by this alliance, and how Macron and Modi are involved with that. And what do you have, Reef?
Well, I brought some interesting stuff. There's new files related to the MKUltra thing. So if you're not familiar with that, you'll figure out all the terrible fun stuff and the men who stare at goats and all that fun. And probably not so fun things that our government is willing to do behind closed doors. So we'll get into that. And I brought a fun little bit of notes from the narrative management from Caitlin on access journalism. So, you know, good picks for me.
Is that how we're going to end, or is that how we're going to end?
With Caitlin, not all the time, but she does some good, and you know,
yeah, she does.
It's easy to pick. I'm like, oh, Caitlin did another banger. All right, I'll take that. So anyway, well, I'm ready. If you're ready,
I am. So yeah, let's get into it. So, so I will say this. I'll preface this that. So those of you who know, we did have a little beef with the Gray Zone a few weeks ago with Wyatt Reed.
Yeah, mainly me, but it's okay.
With you.
Wyatt will get over it.
You know, yeah, you've gotten over it. I'm still getting over it.
Whatever. You know.
But, you know, and I know people, and again, shout out to people, you know, in our community who checked in on me, checked in on the network, and all of us after that Twitter thing. You guys are wonderful in your support and care.
What? I'm sorry.
But we're going to be the bigger people, easy to cancel people who, you know, obviously don't respect others.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, a good story is a good story, and good journalism is good journalism, no matter who it is. So, so we are going to do this story because I think we learn stuff here, even among each other, and we want you guys to learn some stuff. So, Chanda, I know you said you don't know much. You will learn something tonight.
I will for sure.
As with our audience, that's what we're about here. But I did want to bring this up. As I said, I've been holding on to this for about a month now.
Alex and Kit do great work.
Alex and Kit published this article. From Chi-Town Bagman to ECOWAS chairman, meet the former money launderer leading the push to invade Niger. So it brings me no pleasure to kind of report on this, because this is almost a stereotypical African president who is corrupt as hell. That's what the stereotype, but unfortunately Tinubu does fit that stereotype, and speaking to other Nigerians, they pretty much agree. So, and as a person of Nigerian ancestry, I'm going to claim my heritage and say that this dude is no good. So, but before that, we're going to look at African Stream. They did basically a summary of Tinubu, just give you an idea of what the issues that surround him. And then Alex and Kid give get into it more in depth. So go ahead, Reef.
Yep.
Who is Bola Ahmed Tinubu? The Nigerian president and chairman of ECOWAS has a past shrouded in mystery. Now he's trying to invade Niger. African Stream spoke to Alex Rubenstein and Kit Clarenberg of the Grey Zone, whose recent investigation delved into the shady past of one of Nigeria's wealthiest men to try to understand the motives of a man who many refer to as the mother of the market. Over the past 3 decades, Tinubu has played a prominent role in Nigeria's politics, serving as the senator and the governor of the Lagos state. His close ties with the US Embassy have also been subject to scrutiny. But something perhaps equally as sinister is his rise to power.
Bola Tinubu showed up in Chicago with an unknown past on a student visa, and after some studying, although he's lied apparently about his educational background, he started laundering money for a Chicago heroin gang, claiming that one of its leaders was his cousin. It appears that he was able to make a good deal of money from this enterprise and had a portion seized by the U.S. government. As the investigation ramped up, he went back to Nigeria and began his political career.
After being appointed ECOWAS chairman last month, Tinubu promised to promote economic inclusivity and integration. Yet the role of ECOWAS in West Africa has historically been the opposite.
ECOWAS is theoretically meant to maximize member states' collective bargaining power. But actually, it's a bloc that makes it easier for former imperial powers in the region, like France and Britain, to exploit and enfeeble its constituent countries. It imposes strict, Western-approved legal and financial frameworks upon members, and any state deviating from them can expect to be severely punished. In January 2022, ECOWAS imposed sanctions on Mali. This was following the military overthrow of its corrupt, unpopular Western-backed government. This prompted huge street protests in support of the new government by average Malians, who were also very, very, very supportive of their government's efforts to rid their country of malign foreign influence, such as banning French media.
So where does West Africa go from here? The future is uncertain. And while Tinubu may be leading the charge against Niger in West Africa, his day in the sun may not last forever.
Bola Tinubu is the perfect imperial puppet because he has the shady past, because the United States is able to exert leverage over him. He's been embroiled in so many corruption scandals that the moment that he becomes no longer useful to the United States and its Western allies, they can put him in prison. They can do with whatever they want with him, and they can ruin his life. But for now, he's useful leading this Western-backed operation against Nigeria.
Well, all right. So they basically gave a summary of this guy. They go into it more in depth. So that's what we're going to look at now at their article, and kind of delve a little bit more about his past. But so yeah, it's as you know, given that this is a gray zone, and Kit and Alex, no point cutting anything, because yeah, everything just basically connects with each other. So, but anyway, let's see. Do you mind zooming in a bit, Reef?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. All right. So since the overthrow of Niger's US-friendly government, West African nations of the ECOWAS bloc have fronted an invasion of their neighbor. Before leading the charge for intervention, ECOWAS chair Bola Tinubu spent years laundering millions for heroin dealers in Chicago, and has been since ensnared in numerous corruption scandals. Hours after Niger's Western-backed leader was detained by the country's presidential guard on July 28th, Nigerian president and chair of ECOWAS, Bola Tinubu leapt into action, warning that the group of nations will not tolerate any situation that incapacitates a democratically elected government, installed by the U.S., by the way.
Yeah, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As the chairperson of ECOWAS, I state without equivocation that Nigeria stands firmly with the elected government in Niger.
Of course I do.
2 days later, ECOWAS imposed several severe sanctions on Niger, and the bloc issued a stark ultimatum. If the newly inaugurated junta won't reinstate the oust president in a week's time, the group's pro-Western Africa governments will, by military means, if necessary.
If necessary, right. Well, they're going to fuck around and find out.
Well, how old is this? Was it? This says in a week's time, right?
This was written at the end of July, so
yeah,
a week's come and gone.
Well,
right.
Yeah, so they fucked around and they
didn't
did
find out.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And it hasn't worked so well to Nigeria's benefit. But anyway, on Saturday, July 6th, 1 day before the deadline, ECOWAS leaders approved a plan to invade the country with the ominous caveat that they are not going to tell the coup plotters when and where they are going to strike. If ECOWAS gets its way, member states Benin, Cabo Verde, Cote d'Ivoire, the Gambia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Libya, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Senegal, and Togo will be pressured to send their soldiers to invade Niger.
Yeah.
These developments have pressed the typically overlooked West African country of Niger into the Western media spotlight. But if hostilities break out, it wouldn't be just one single impoverished African state in the crosshairs.
It'll be anything with resources we can steal. You know.
Right. Neighboring Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea, which are also governed by military administrations that have recently seized power by force, have all warned that any attack on Niger will be viewed as an attack on them too. If their ECOWAS rivals make their first move, the nations which mainstream media have dubbed Africa's coup belt have pledged to unleash their military forces as well, an announcement which should end any illusions that restoring the country's previous president would be a painless process. Leading the pro-Western coalition is the president of its most powerful country, Nigeria, Bola Tinubu. One of Nigeria's wealthiest men, the source of the scandal-plagued president's fortune remains unclear. Documents reviewed by the Gray Zone revealed Tinubu as a longtime U.S. asset who has named as an accomplice in a massive drug-running operation that saw him launder billions on behalf of a heroin-dealing relative.
Nice.
For over 30 years, Bola Tinubu has been a major force in Nigeria's political scene and country's economy, with local nicknames ranging from the mother of the market to Godfather of Lagos and the Lion of the Bordelian. But his power inside Nigeria went largely unnoticed by international audiences until this year, when he became ECOWAS's chair after winning the presidency in an election closely tracked by the U.S. government. Gee, I wonder why.
So this guy's a Guaido, basically.
Yes.
I mean,
oh, yeah.
We have one in every country, don't we? I mean, just name a place, and there's the American bobblehead.
They just got rid of one in Niger. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Just in the global south, basically, like a lot of these guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, as president, Tinubu quickly instituted a regime of economic reforms backed by the U.S.-controlled International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Over the course of Tinubu's political career in Nigeria, the African operator has cultivated a close relationship with the U.S. Embassy. According to a slew of classified State Department cables released by WikiLeaks, American officials heavily relied on Tinubu's assessments of the domestic political landscape. The ECOWAS chair's early life is shrouded in mystery, and even his exact age is unknown. Nearly every detail of Tinubu's personal history prior to his appearance in Chicago on a student visa is in dispute, including his legal birth name.
If that is your real name.
Obama. Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Records
you're
from
he's gay.
Chicago
Is that
State-
what you're saying? God.
What?
He's gay.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
He's gay.
No, we need 20 years to find that stuff out.
Yeah.
Records from Chicago State University show that Tinubu received a degree in business administration in 1979. In the following years, media reports indicate that Tinubu was employed in some capacity at a number of major U.S. based multinationals, including Mobil Oil Nigeria, consulting firm Deloitte, and GTE, which was the largest communication and utilities company in the US at the time. Of the few details about the Nigerian president's early exploits which can be confirmed, many are derived from a 1993 court docket named Tinubu as an accomplice in a massive Midwestern drug smuggling operation. As journalist David Hundeland has detailed, and Nico actually spoke to him. He's a reporter based in, so court documents from the U.S. District Court's Northern District of Illinois make it clear that Tinubu amassed a small fortune laundering money for a heroin trafficking relative in Chicago, and that U.S. government officials ultimately seized well over $1 million from various bank accounts registered under the current Nigerian president's name. A 1993 report by IRS Special Agent Kevin Moss explained that there is probable cause to believe that drugs in certain bank accounts controlled by Bola Tinubu represent proceeds of drug trafficking. Therefore, these funds are forfeitable to the United States. In the documents, Moss described an extremely close working relationship between the future Nigerian president and two Nigerian heroin dealers named, oh boy, excuse my butchering of these names, Adodun, oh, you need to sit back in.
Okay. Abadwin,
Olasui, Agbele, and Anage Bolega Muzi Akande, the latter of whom was listed as Tinubu's cousin on an application for a vehicle loan. According to bank reports, when Bola Tinubu first came to First Heritage Bank in December 1989 to open the accounts, he was introduced to them by Abba Adebogega Muze Akande, who at that time maintained an account at the bank. What's more, bank records indicate that Bola Tinubu also opened a joint checking account in his name and the name of his wife, Oluremi Tinubu, who had previously opened a joint bank account also at this bank with Algeria Akande, the wife of Adeboyega Muze Akande, Moss explained. In several of the applications, the addresses used by Tinubu exactly match those previously used by Akande.
Okay. I'll zoom for this. Here you go.
Yeah, for this because it's a little blurry. For the reasons set forth above, there is probable cause to believe that the funds in the accounts held by First Heritage Bank, Citibank, and Citibank International in the name of Bola Tinubu and Compass Finance and Investment Company Limited represent property that was involved in transactions in violation of all of that.
USC 1956 and 57. Or is property traceable to such property represents the proceeds of drug trafficking, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know all of that. Yeah. So
an individual money market account and now account at First Heritage Bank. Special agent noted in the application, it was stated that his address was 7504 South Stewart, Chicago, Illinois, the same address used previously by Akande.
Right.
Oh, I gotta go back.
Actually, go back.
Yeah,
thank you. Back records disclosed that 5 days after the account was opened on January 4th, 1990, $80,000 was deposited into the now account at First Heritage Bank by wire transfer through First Chicago of Bank One Houston, the report continues. According to the IRS, the money was sent by Akande. But the Nigerian president's financial dealings with the heroin traffickers went even further, according to the IRS special agent. He wrote that Citibank's records documented 2 additional corporate accounts held in the name of Compass Finance and Investment Company Limited, which were controlled by Bola Tinubu. When Tinubu opened these accounts, he provided a memorandum of association and articles of association, which identified Muze Abeboyega Akande and Abel Lundon Osasui Abelei as directors of Compass Finance and Investment Company Limited, Moss wrote. In the end, Tinubu somehow managed to deposit over $660,000 in his First Heritage Bank account in 1990, at more than $1.2 million the next year, all while claiming to take home just $2,400 a month from his position at Mobil Oil Nigeria. Actually, that was a lot of money at that time in '99.
That was
Yeah,
a lot
dude,
of
that's
money
a
back in the
lot of
90s.
money
A
moving.
million, yeah.
Moving.
Back then.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing for that money to sit. It's another to move it between like 5 different accounts. Like, no one noticed.
That's what they do.
No one noticed all that. Like,
Right.
Chicago's known for following money of mob guys. Like,
Right.
They didn't notice
Right,
this shit.
especially-
What happened?
Right.
The RICO
especially
Act,
given-
yeah, come on.
Right.
Yeah, especially given
Yeah.
that he was an immigrant at the time
Right.
here on a student visa.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my
So-
God, they call
Yeah,
up
which-
your butt. Yeah, come on.
Which means that this part, the Mobil Oil Nigeria, is far more important to our needs than heroin dealing, which you know we'll overlook all
well,
that.
they go hand in hand. If you go
Yes.
back and you look at the Clintons and Little Rock and what was going through there and how it was building the Epstein empire. I mean, they're all connected, political party wise, who they're supporting in these countries. I mean, yeah, like I said, they have a handpicked one for each country, and it sounds like he had a good deal with being able to, you know, that kind of money in the early 90s. That back then, a millionaire was a big deal. Still.
Well, yeah, especially given that again, immigrant. Like
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Like
Well, and think of how
and
much
again,
this
we don't know what
how much we prioritize heroin dealing from the Middle East because we want their oil.
Yep.
Same thing. Like this is just different place, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, also keep in mind Nigeria's biggest export is oil.
Yes.
So you know,
that's the one on the books. You know, weapons and
But
other
that's
stuff.
also
They also
significant
do a
in
lot
the-
of.
Right, but
You
that's
know?
also significant in terms of our dealings here. Well, in America, like that's what we wanted. So it could be very well being that Tinubu was not necessarily a plant, but essentially placed in that position, you know, as we will see later for his role now in terms
He's
of
a
now
figurehead that they put in there that they control. That's what they do always. We're going to put you in this position. And if you're a good boy and take our money and do what we say, then we'll move you up to the next position where we need
Exactly.
you. This is classically exactly what Zelensky is.
Yes. Yeah. Nepotism babies at the finest.
Right.
You know. So
Anyway, let's move on. As the investigation into the money laundering scheme began to gain traction, Tinubu left the U.S. and returned to Nigeria. Ultimately, Moss was able to speak to Tinubu by telephone on a number of occasions, and a special agent reported that the future president initially acknowledged his personal and financial dealings with the pair of drug traffickers. But in late January of 1992, Tinubu advised agents investigating this matter that he had no business association or financial relationship with Abeli or Akande, Moss wrote. This information contradicted his prior statements on January 13, 1992, when he advised law enforcement officers that the money used to open the account at First Heritage Bank had come from Akande. Back in Nigeria, Tinubu had already begun to transition into the political arena. By 1992, he had been elected to the Senate, and in 1999, he became governor of Lagos State, a position he retained until 2007. At some point in his tenure, Tinubu established a relationship with the U.S. Embassy, which would last for years to come, according to a trove of diplomatic cables released by WikiLeaks.
thank you, Julian.
Bank records.
Yeah, exactly.
Bank records disclosed that there we go. But even his State Department allies couldn't help noticing Tinubu's penchant for dishonesty. One particularly noteworthy cable pointed out that the politician was known to play fast and loose with the facts and has been caught in the past embellishing his educational achievements.
That's them saying that. That's the cable pointed out. That's them. They're like, oh no, he lies a lot. You know.
Yeah, he's shady. He's
like,
shady.
be careful. Don't believe him. You know.
In the end, however, Tinubu's usefulness seemed to outweigh his casual relationship with the truth, and the future Nigerian president went on to provide American officials with a near continuous assessment of the political situation in his country. One typically intimate meeting with Tinubu ended with the U.S. ambassador to Nigeria commenting, "As always, we found his take on the national political scene to be insightful."
And a lie.
Lie.
yeah.
When the cables came to light in 2011, many Nigerians were shocked at the candor with which their elected officials spoke to Washington's envoys, their willingness of our elites to indulge unsolicited information about the U.S. Undisclosed information about the nation to U.S. officials portrays an infantile thirst for parental dictatorship. Nigerian American professor and columnist Farouk Korogi wrote. Though Tinubu appeared to have escaped justice for his alleged role in a herring trafficking conspiracy, accusations of corruption would continue to dog the ECOWAS chair throughout his political career in Nigeria. Since leaving office as governor of Lagos in 2007, Tinubu picked every subsequent winning candidate, according to German broadcaster DW, which noted earlier this year that the tycoon is believed to be one of Nigeria's richest politicians, but the source of his wealth is unknown. In recent years, clues about the origins of the fortune amassed by one of Africa's leading political players have begun to come into light. In 2009, Tinubu came under investigation by the Metropolitan Police of London, who were probing allegations that the politician had pooled money with two other Nigerian governors to create a front company known as the African Development Fund Incorporation. Investigators alleged the unusual business arrangement was actually a joint effort to illegally acquire shares of Econet, a telecommunications firm founded by U.S. intelligence asset and Gates Foundation trustee Shrive Bashiwa. But attempts to probe the legitimacy of the transactions in question was sidelined when the Nigerian federal government stonewalled the British investigation, which ultimately concluded without a single arrest. To this day, Nigerian authorities have yet to release the evidence requested by UK authorities.
I wonder why.
In 2011, Tinubu was tried before the Code of Conduct Tribunal in Nigeria for illegally operating 16 foreign bank accounts. Eager to avoid the embarrassment he previously suffered when being photographed in court, the ECOWAS chair reportedly refused to take his place at the dock in a judicial hearing. But the unwelcome attention appears to have done little to rein in the political's extravagant taste, and Tinubu once again found himself embroiled in a corruption scandal following an investigation into the luxurious 7,000 square foot mansion where the Nigerian president stays when receiving medical care in London.
Could you imagine, Care Bear, if, I don't know, someone being indicted for treasonous things just didn't show up? Like, I'm not going to be there for the hearing. Like, what they would say. But we're more than willing to work with this guy who is unbelievably corrupt. Even we say this, right? Like, but yet, you know, like, other people are the dictators. So, okay.
Well, I like how they say his relationship with the U.S. Embassy lasted for years, and then wonder who's protecting him.
Right. I wonder. It couldn't have been us or Bill Gates. Why is Bill Gates connected to every corrupt asshole?
Everything.
Why? Can we figure that out first? Like, can y'all follow?
Well, we know what that's about. That goes down to eugenics at the end of the day. The bottom line is he wants
couldn't have anything to do with a new world order, the Illuminati.
Exactly.
Not to get too Alex Jonesy in here for a minute, but you know, okay. I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, there's more. But the suspicious confluence of money and influence didn't end with the mysterious mansion in London. During Nigeria's 2019 general election, footage of armored trucks entered Tinubu's residence went viral on social media, and the incident was widely seen as proof that the politician was engaged in a fraudulent vote buying scheme. But Tinubu remained defiant, telling reporters, I keep money wherever I want.
I'm rich,
Excuse me, excuse me, is it my money or government money? He asked. If I don't represent any agency or government and I have money to spend, if I have money, if I like, I give it to the people free of charge, he insisted. This January, the official explanation for the people evolved again when one of his party's representatives told a Nigerian TV station that the armored trucks in question had simply missed their way and arrived at the wrong address. As while Tinubu had seemingly admitted to dispensing cash to the public, the party's organizing secretary in Lagos offered the bemused presenters an equally improbable explanation. He said that jokingly.
Yeah, it was a joke. Don't worry about it.
It was a joke.
The money is there.
While ECOWAS was officially founded, what were you going to say, Reef?
That's just fucking, like, they're so stupid. Like, do they think we're dumb? They must. They must think we're all
yes, they do.
Idiots.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
That's like
yes,
that's like a Home Alone plot. Like, that's anyway. Continue. It's fucking bullshit as always. What else is new?
While ECOWAS was officially founded by the Treaty of Lagos in 1975, its official history notes that bloc's origins date back to the creation of the CFA franc in 1945, which consolidated France's West African empire into a single currency nation. Hold on to that.
Yeah, we'll get into that more.
Yeah. Publicly, the move was described as a benevolent attempt to shield these colonies from the subsequences of the French franc's sharp devaluation in 1945, following the creation of the US-dominated Bretton Woods system. As a French finance
minister, yeah.
Finance minister, yeah.
It's kind of hard to read that. Said at the time, in a show of her generosity and selfishness, metropolitan France, wishing not to impose on her fairway daughters the consequences of her own poverty, is setting different exchange rates for their currency. In reality, the introduction of the CFA franc meant that Paris was able to maintain highly unequal trading relationships with its African colonies at a time when its economy was ravaged by World War II and its overseas empire was rapidly disintegrating. The currency made it cheap for member states to import from France and vice versa, but prohibitively expensive for them to export anything anywhere else.
Yep.
Which we've talked about a few times.
This forced dependency in Francophone West Africa created a captive market for the French and by extension the rest of Europe. That dynamic, which has stunted regional economic development for decades, persists to this day. The CFA franc's continued dominance ensures West African states remain under the economic and political control of France. Those African nations are powerless to enact meaningful policy changes as they lack control over their own monetary policy. That the currency features so prominently in the authorized history of ECOWAS is instructive because the bloc has long been criticized as an extension of French imperialism. It was not for nothing that in 1960, then French President Charles de Gaulle made membership of the CFA franc a precondition for decolonization in Africa. Though ECOWAS is theoretically meant to maximize member states' collective bargaining power by fostering interstate economic and political cooperation, such harmonization makes it easier for former imperial powers like France to exploit and enfeeble their constituent countries. Thus, the bloc imposes a strict Western-approved legal and financial framework upon its members, and any state deviating from these rules is harshly punished. In January 2022, ECOWAS imposed strict sanctions on Mali, prompting thousands to take the streets in support of the military government that seized power in January the previous year.
Yep.
The new government's efforts to purge the country from malign foreign influence saw a complete ban of French media imposed, a decision which was slammed by the UN, but cheered by average Malians. ECOWAS applied similar measures to Burkina Faso in response to a September 2022 military coup, which saw Paul-Henri Santiago Damiba removed just after 8 months in power. Though Damiba himself seized by a military coup, there was little condemnation from Western officials and few suggestions that ECOWAS imposed sanctions, perhaps due to the ousted leader's pro-Western orientation and status as a graduate of multiple elite U.S. military and State Department training courses.
Another one.
Since 1990, ECOWAS has raised 7 separate conflicts in West Africa in order to protect the West's preferred despots across the region. Meanwhile, between 1960 and 2020, Paris launched 50 separate overt interventions in Africa. Figures for clandestine activities conducted during this time are unavailable, but the country's fingerprints are plastered all over multiple rigged elections, coups, and assassinations that has sustained complaint, corrupt governments in power throughout the continent.
Yep.
As President Jacques Chirac remarked in 2008, without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power. The perspective was reaffirmed in a 2013 French state report, Africa is our future. Indeed, the mere existence of anti-imperialist governments anywhere in the region is intolerable to France.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Luckily for the French elite, compromised figures like Bola Tinubu are still on hand to do their dirty work for them.
They just tell them themselves. Like,
yes.
They go, oh, we definitely need, they're going to be, if we're not there, it's going to be a third world country. Well, like, let's find out then. Let's give it a shot and see. Right. Wait. They got uranium. Wait, hold on. Like, we might need that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we'll make them a better country. They might think you won't.
Right.
So.
But like I said, keep in mind for the next segment, because, and I saw someone in the chat say, like, BRICS is in trouble, essentially. And we've had, yes. So Ghostwright said the West will infiltrate BRICS Plus is what they do. And that very well will be happening, may be happening, considering what India is up to. In what I'm going
and
to
the Vatican.
Later, so.
As
I
well.
agree.
They're trying to sneak in there too.
Ghost Star, you nailed it, because that's exactly what they do. The West infiltrates everything, and they started laying those seeds years ago for some of this. I mean, look at how far back with this guy we're looking. You know,
yeah,
right.
They've got their little tentacles wiggled into every country. I don't care where you're at. You could be looking at the global South. You could be looking at Africa. You could be looking at Europe. It doesn't matter. Our tentacles are there and
everywhere.
We've had free reign for our deep state to do whatever they want in any country they want without repercussions
for 60 years.
Right.
60 years at least. I mean,
openly
back when they were the
admitted
OSI. Yeah.
Hacking other countries' phone lines, stealing their information and data. Like, no one cares. Do whatever you want, America. It's going to be fine. Well, turns out some countries might do something.
I got to tell you, Collin, I appreciated this segment because, I mean, the most I get is maybe Convo Couch, or if Richie's talking about it, Richie Medhurst, of course, But for most Americans, especially us down here in the trailer parks, we're too busy trying to live and figure out how we're going to pay rent and get the next power bill covered to be able to go in and really learn the history of all these countries, and how long they've been colonized by France and by Europe. And as a result of the end of World War II, so much of what's happening now and what's coming undone is the crap that they tied together with a big bow at the end of World War II.
It's all connected. We try to tell people foreign policy is domestic policy is foreign policy is like it's all the same.
And what we're going here is, and again, I'll go into this in the next segment that I do, because again, my friend of mine kind of helped. Well, hopefully he'll help me out a lot more with it, but because he had some stuff he wanted to share regarding what's happening in India, but it's everywhere. This whole corruption,
India's so in trouble. I know.
Seemingly among the best of the best in terms of politicians and presidents throughout the world, they all have their hand. Many of them regarding that's connected to neocolonialism in the West. So. So that's why I'm a little concerned about BRICS now, which I've always had I had concerns about it, but I think more of those issues regarding BRICS that I've said on the show before are more or less confirmed, just given, politicians in these countries are playing both sides. And I've seen that in Africa for sure, given Tinubu and then other, presidents, prime ministers in Africa, but it's happening everywhere.
Well, that's the thing. It's like people talk about the globalists, right? But then they don't actually practice looking at what's happening globally. Like, what is money doing globally? Look at what the Rothschilds spend their money on. Look at where Gates is putting their money into. Like, look, there's a reason why they're funding things like making bug milk in like, you know, like South African, like in South Africa. Like, oh, let's figure out how to get them to eat bugs. Okay. Why are they doing that there? Anyway, we'll get into some of that a bit with this story. So more from people that work at the Gray Zone, but this time from Mint Press, Kit Clarenberg, who does great work. New files reveal MKUltra's terrifying reach, ethnic bioweapons, mind control, and disturbing experiments. Get your tinfoil hats ready, everybody. Go ahead and put those on now because we don't want them to read.
They admit to this stuff. It's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not tinfoil hat time.
No, I know, right?
This is history, man. This is what this is.
Keeps the government out of my head. In a groundbreaking investigation, renowned anthropologist Orasamni Burton has blown the lid off a dark chapter in CIA history. Classified agency files recently obtained through Freedom of Information laws expose shocking ties between the infamous MKUltra program and nightmarish experiments on prisoners of color within the United States. Can you say Tuskegee? Can we say that at home, kids? Burton's findings expose MKUltra's sinister mission to develop psychological warfare and behavioral manipulation tactics specifically aimed at people of color under the guise of counterinsurgency. Unbelievably, these barbaric trials were conducted during a turbulent era when numerous U.S. government agencies relentlessly sought to crush the civil rights movement and prisons brimmed with political radicalism. Disturbing revelations puts the CIA actions into sharp focus, revealing a ruthless bid to quell black resistance both on the streets and behind bars, but it doesn't stop there. Burton's disclosures raise urgent and profound questions about the far-reaching impact of those operations, both in the past and unsettlingly even today. Among the most haunting questions is whether the agency actively pursued a race-specific mind control weapon, an idea that strikes at the very core of ethical and moral boundaries. As the nation grapples with this revelation, one thing is certain: Burton's expose demands answers and accountability for the harrowing atrocities committed in the name of national security. The truth must be unveiled and justice served for those who suffered under the relentless grip of MKUltra's clandestine horrors, famously Unabomber, right? Part of this?
Right.
In that part
You
of
know,
that?
my dad was in prison with the Unabomber.
Right.
Ted Kaczynski.
Nice.
He was across the hall from him. But you know, the thing about MKUltra is they say they've destroyed all these records, right? When they were requested by the Senate back in the 60s, oh my God, they freaked out and they destroyed all of them. And there was 2,000 of them left. Well, when you go back and you look at what they were actually doing, I mean, it could be have far reaches all the way to Manson. When you look at what the CIA was doing, experimenting with LSD, with Timothy Leary on Haight-Ashbury at the Haight-Ashbury Health Clinic in the 70s. So, I mean, we can't just say Ted Kaczynski because it could be so many more.
Yeah, they were trying to find gay bombs, literally, so that they can turn enemies
not the
gay
frogs.
And like fight. Right, not the gay frogs. That was Monsanto's doing. It was here that of the many medical research facilities abused by the CIA has medical research facilities that they use. Oh, I wonder if the government still does that. For the purposes
they were ran by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb.
Yep.
No coincidence that he's related to Scott Gottlieb. You know,
right? So the Allen Memorial Institute, a psychiatric hospital in Montreal, Quebec, looms perhaps the largest and most darkly. Is that most darkly? That sounds like a great band name. The most darkly. Anyway, it was here that from 1957 to 1964, the agency secretly operated the program Subproject 68. Again, one number off. It should definitely be 69. Just skip 68 all the time. Under the leadership of notorious psychiatrist Ewan Cameron.
He was a psycho too, man. This guy.
Yep. Cameron sought to depattern minds via a technique known as psychic driving. It entailed drugging unconsenting, unwitting patients with incapacitating cocktails of psychedelic substances then subjecting them to electric shocks while they listened to hours of recorded, looped audio, aka torture. That's what that's called.
Yeah. It's Stranger Things. If you've ever watched Stranger Things and they lock 11 in the room and they make her mind travel, that's what they're talking about.
Yep. Because that what do they call that? Where they like let some stuff slip out through media. Like there's a word for that. I forget. Some programming. So Cameron hopped to render his subjects' minds a blank state onto which new behaviors, thoughts, memories, and personalities could be surreptitiously, I know that word, but imposed from the outside. It also served the purpose of interrogation. In the 1958 edition of the journal Psychoanalytic Quarterly, he boasted this technique could be used for penetration of defenses, elicitation of hetero-inaccessible material, changing of attitudes, and setting up a dynamic implant. Fast forward to 1966, when the New York governor Nelson Rockefeller, whose family foundation played a central role in the establishment of Cameron's Institute, initiated a chilling partnership. Consultants from McGill University, the Institute's parent, were brought in to conduct research on the criminally insane in New York's prisons. Officially, the mission was to find innovative methods to deter recidivism and understand the causes of criminality through experimental studies. But was there more to this collaboration than met the eye? Motherfuckers are Decepticons. That's what they're trying to tell us. They are more than meets the eye. An inmate at a New York Department of Corrections facility engages in an experiment as part of a diagnostic and treatment program. Little picture gray zone includes. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, the same period saw a disturbing trend emerge. Black Americans expressing revolutionary views were increasingly labeled as suffering from severe mental health conditions. Psychiatric, this is why I brought this shit. Psychiatrist Jonathan Metzel's groundbreaking work, The Protest Psychosis. I'm going to buy you that book later, Collin. Uncovered how medical research articles began portraying Negro men as having a uniquely dangerous form of schizophrenia compared to their white counterparts. Collin, you're schizophrenic. They said so.
I mean, as James Baldwin said, as a black man, I love this country and I have every right to criticize her perpetually. I guess in a way, you can make that argument that you do become schizophrenic when calling out the establishment.
Right.
I think
I hear
there's
voices
definitely
about it all
some
the
truth
time.
to that.
Exactly.
Shut up! I'm doing a thing. So come
Shut up, I'm trying to save the
1968,
world.
right? Yeah. Come 1968, the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders underwent an alarming update, adding hostility and aggression as prominent symptoms of schizophrenia. The implications were profound. Civil rights activists daring to resist were at risk of being diagnosed and institutionalized. Prisoners refusing to bend to oppressive jail regimes could be conveniently labeled as criminally insane. Nestled 25 miles from New York's northern border was Quebec. The infamous Dannemora State Hospital for the Criminally Insane took center stage in Rockefeller's ominous initiative. At the helm of this partnership was Canadian psychiatrist Bruno Cormier, a longtime clinician at the Allen Memorial Institute during the 50s and 60s. Together with the notorious Ewan Cameron, they hatched a chilling plan for a pilot center for juvenile delinquency, a place that would delve into the darkest corners of human behavior. The Envision Center would include laboratories for psychological studies, for work in genetics, for endocrinology investigations, for sociological studies. Cormier was particularly keen for the institution to bring light on behavioral problems and bridge the research gap between juvenile delinquency and adult criminality. Dannemora State Hospital represented an opportunity to achieve these objectives via other means. So they put this here, right? We're going to zoom into this bit, right? All the way down here, but they put in a ton, right? But research projects would require the establishment of labor studies, right? Operating areas for carrying on field studies among the laboratories would be those for psychological studies, for work in genetics, right? Endocrinological investigations, all that crap, which we just read a second ago. Cormier's proposed Center for Study of Juvenile Delinquency included non-traditional methods of approaching detainee delinquency, including studying their genetics. I wonder why that would play a part in that, Care Bear. So by 1969, Miguel consultants, under the guise of training, had transformed prison guards into practitioners of hypnosis and aversion therapy techniques. One grim therapy session was subsequently sketched by an observer. So let me paint you this story. So correctional officers became therapists. It's an admirable undertaking to make them semi-professionals, but I have seen these former correctional officers practice aversion therapy with prisoners. The prisoners start gagging as they retrace the steps of their crimes. The scene was quite revolting, both for those who watched and those who took part, yet there is still no evidence that anyone has been cured. Okay? So, in 1990, Dr. Douglas Lipton, director of the Narcotic and Drug Research Institute, exposed Danamora's chilling mission to obliterate inmates' identities and mold them into obedient pawns. In testimony to Congress, he laid bare the devastating efficacy of these efforts, which left an indelible mark on the lives of those they ensnared. Behind closed doors, Bruno Cormier reached out to every prison warden in New York State, urging them to send their most hardened offenders to become subject to this wicked venture. The wardens were more than willing to comply, eager to rid themselves of the most problematic inmates. Assembling a group of 50 of the most troubled souls, described by Dr. Lipton as the worst group you had ever seen, the Allen team subjected them to a year of MKUltra torture. The torment they endured stripped them down to their very cores, leaving them vulnerable to resocialization attempts bordering on mind-altering manipulation. A year after being released from Dannemora, following a year of treatment, just 2 had returned to the facility. The rest, it seems, had been successfully reduced to blank slates, as Cameron originally sought, and their minds successfully reprogrammed from the ground up, Dr. Lipton concluded. What it does is it takes you back to a kind of kindergarten level and then brings you back up. So could you imagine that, Collin? Adults being reduced to the kids you work with, and then, you know, what that might entail?
There's so much more, though. There's so much more to MKUltra. MKUltra had over 200 subgroups that we know about. I mean, just research-wise, they figure, because we'll never get an accurate number. And I mean, yeah, they stripped people down to their very core. They broke them. There's so many stories out there. If you're really interested in this, there's quite a few videos that are still up on YouTube with supposed MKUltra survivors. And I mean, the range is so insane, from government inside ops to just a housewife that they wanted to see if they could break because the husband sent her away because he didn't like her, you know. Right. And I'm so like, I see what they're doing nowadays with what they did before, and there's so much more of this going on currently, but we just classify it as something so totally different.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is just torture at its, I mean, let's pump someone full of psychedelics and then give them pain and shock treatment, and you know, they go into a bit of what some of these were like, right? So echoes of Cameron's infamous psychic driving likewise emerged in the disturbing research of McGill psychologist Ernest G. Poser, delving into patient reactions under methylhexatone-induced sleep and cross-cultural differences in pain tolerance. Poser's chilling method didn't spare inmates, and they were subjected to unimaginable horrors in the name of research. So we're going to imagine some of them. His work frequently employed deceptive means that what seemed like torture instruments, including a blood pressure monitor with sharp, hard rubber projections sewn into it, which he used to test a patient's pain tolerance. He was among the McGill specialists tasked with experimenting on inmates in New York State. In 1968, he probed whether prisoners deemed sociopaths suffered from an adrenaline deficiency, preventing them from learning cautionary lessons from fear-producing experiences. Putting the theory to the test, Poser and his team injected inmates diagnosed as sociopathic with adrenaline. They subjected them to electric shocks. One of his students was seemingly so swept up in the lack of ethical restrictions over their work, they proposed an experiment in which prisoners were strapped to electroconvulsive therapy devices and told they were taking part in a competition. The loser would receive a shock at a level set by their opponent. Each subject will have 20 trials in which he will lose on a predetermined 50% of the trials, but which to him will apparently be random. Okay? So, Collin, have you ever heard of the superstitious birds? Right?
No.
So, this is a classic scientific tale of, and I forget which birds exactly. I think it might have been crows even. But it was essentially, they would give treats based off random things. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So the birds would then do these elaborate things to get a treat because they don't think it's random. Right? So they're going to do a dance and do a couple flips and, you know, then their treat comes, but then it might not come. So we got to add to it. So yeah, pretty fucked up, unethical
the crows
shit.
hate the other crow that got the extra stuff. Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
True Stream Media. If you've ever seen any of their work, True Stream Media, Melissa and Andrew Drake, they did like a 3-hour. They even went to these hospitals. They break down Cameron. They tell you everything about that sick motherfucker. I mean, he was warped. I mean, like warped, like the concentration camps type of warp. Like he got off on torturing these people and hurting these people, and there was literally no limit to what they did in MKUltra. Like, oh, let's see what happens if we drill a hole right through their head. Okay, let's do it. I mean, it was just the amount of
put them on the racks and see if they accept Catholicism.
Yeah, that's exactly what Cameron did. It was disgusting. So there's a lot of stuff out there. But guys, I got to bounce off here. I still got a lot of packing to do. I appreciate you guys having me on. It was fun.
Same.
And I hope you guys will ask for me to come back and come hang out with us over on Roar. Yeah. Yep. Thanks for all the info. This was a great informative show, you guys.
Appreciate you being here. We have your Linktree in the description below for people to go find you.
You guys are sweet. Thank you.
At Chanda Masta on Twitter, right? I think if people want to go directly there.
Chanda Masta.
Cool.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Oh, no. We're in the infinite. Hold on, I fixed it. And yep, there we go. How about that? No. This.
There we go.
God. Sometimes I do things good. Where are we at? Takes a second for Stream Deck. Cool. So to continue, from September 9th to 13th, 1971, a mass riot broke out in New York State's notorious Attica prison. You know Attica, right? Inmates were motivated by abysmal conditions, including mass overcrowding, systemic violence, and racism, as U.S. historian Howard Zinn recorded. I'm surprised we need a historian to tell you that that's still happening. All these things are still the case. Prisoners spent 14 to 16 hours a day in their cells. It's probably more now. Their mail was read, their reading material restricted, their visits from families conducted through a mesh screen, their medical care disgraceful, their parole system inequitable, racism everywhere. I mean, what's changed? That whole list is shit that's still here. So the uprising was brought to an end by a blood-soaked massacre sanctioned personally by Nelson Rockefeller. We go back to this guy, right? Hundreds of New York State police troopers, Bureau of Criminal Investigation personnel, deputy sheriffs, park police, and correctional officers stormed occupied areas of Attica through a smog of tear gas, indiscriminately opening fire on inmates with shotguns. In all, 33 died and 85 were injured. Many prisoners who were not resisting, as well as individuals the rioters had taken hostage, were among them. Right? These are the chilling pictures that people should remember. So makeshift hospital over there in Block D. Conspicuously, New York's former partnership with McGill ended almost immediately thereafter, and Dannemora State Hospital was rebranded as the Adirondack Correctional Treatment Education Center, in the manner of a hydra, though it's become home to a new behavioral modification initiative, the Prescription Program. In April 1972, Walter Dunbar, New York's Deputy Corrections Commissioner, said the initiative focused on prisoners who perpetrate overt acts that incite, agitate, and provoke other inmates to militant, radical, and antisocial activities. Sounds like not much has changed other than a few extra words, Care Bear. As Ora Sanmi Burton writes. Such statements leaked the program to plantation discourses that pathologize black resistance, while implicating prison authorities in the use of behavior modification techniques for political ends, aka counterinsurgency. In August 2022, Mint Press revealed how black Americans were disproportionately targeted by the CIA's monstrous mind control machinations. Many MKUltra trials appeared to have been expressly conducted to gauge political, potentially varying reactions to psychedelic drugs and black and white participants. That the CIA had a specific or greater interest in the effect of certain substances on people of color rather than the general civilian population was an obvious suspicion. We're heading up to Oliver North, Care Bear. That's what we're getting to. However, academic experts consulted by Mint Press at the time were dismissive of that proposition. They argued MKUltra's distinct racial character simply reflected the compositions of institutions targeted by the CIA and concomitant a lack of value attached to black test subjects by the agency and its assets within the medical community. I'm betting it's a bit of both. It's probably racist bullshit, but also classist bullshit. I'm betting we're back to that argument. So Burton's findings strongly suggest that, far from merely focusing on people of color due to their profusion in prisons and medical centers and racist contempt, the CIA did indeed seek to determine optimal drugs for targeting black Americans, if not other ethnic groups. I wonder why crack became such a problem.
Right.
Once the RX program was underway, prisons across New York, including Attica, began eagerly applying its techniques to their inmates. This extended to say that word, Collin. It's
surreptitiously.
Yeah, surreptitiously. That's what it is. Dosing them with uncertain substances, among other experimental methods, for the purpose of pacification and control. A contemporary account of institutional maltreatment at DePonic's Eastern Correctional Facility described how drugs secretly placed in food turned prisoners into vegetables. That's their words, Collin. Like, how are we better than anywhere else? Please tell me.
Right.
Like,
we're not.
Almost all inmates there were transferred from other jails and promised educational and vocational training once they arrived, but none ever materialized. Strikingly, a large percentage of them were considered to be politically conscious or agitators. One prisoner who suspected his food was being spiked with tranquilizers due to feeling chronic fatigue conducted a test. Deliberately starving himself, he started feeling better immediately. The drowsiness went away, and I felt stronger and more alert. Another compared the sustained lethargy he experienced at the prison to his time at Dannemora. Suspiciously, too, prisoners were prohibited from drawing their own water from drinking fountains in the mess hall. They had to request it from guards, who would always go to a concealed kitchen area to retrieve the orders, which consistently tasted different from tap water. So, if the CIA was hunting for an ethnic bioweapon for the purposes of mind control, it was not alone. In Washington, during World War II, the U.S. Army conducted grotesque chemical experiments on its own Asian, Black, and Puerto Rican troops to test varying reactions to the same substances. U.S. citizens of Asian descent were explicitly chosen as proxies for Japan's civilian and military population to see how mustard gas and other heinous munitions would affect the enemy. The same thinking and dynamic, of course, applied to the Army's blast test subjects. Fast forward to November 1970, and the in-house journal Military Review published an article by geneticist Carl A. Larson titled Ethnic Weapons. A approvingly noting an enzyme deficiency in Southeastern Asian populations made resistance of the continent susceptible to a poison to which caucasoids are largely adapted. He advocated exploring how other enzyme inhibitors such as BZ and its chemical relative LSD affected different ethnic populations. So, in 1974, a government committee slammed the RX program's logic and vision as evoking the specter of the resocialization, rethinking, and brainwashing camps of totalitarian societies. The previous year, the CIA director Richard Helms had ordered MKUltra to be wound down and its entire file trail destroyed due to fears the agency might be subjected to official scrutiny in the wake of the Watergate scandal. Even though MKUltra was efficiently dismantled, its cruel techniques lived on as codified by CIA and U.S. military interrogation and torture doctrine. Of course, we tortured some folks. As Mint Press News reported, in April 2022, these malevolent methods were mercilessly applied at black sites and Gitmo, sowing the seeds of false testimony to justify the excesses of the war on terror. The darkness of MKUltra lingers still, calling for urgent answers and transparency. America's black community deserves nothing less than the full extent of these operations exposed, corporate culprits held accountable, and rightful compensation for survivors. Cough reparations, cough, as the shadow of the past stretch into the present, the demand on the truth rings louder than ever, and justice becomes an undeniable imperative. Care Bear, thoughts?
Yes, sir. I mean, you remember during COVID when black people were afraid to take the jab?
Yes. It's almost like having a thing where you tell them, oh, we're going to give it to you African Americans first. All the African Americans go, nah, fuck that.
Right.
Like,
this is a generation that my dad grew up in. So, you know, so these stories and similar, you know, throughout, you know, like in Europe too, and the Caribbean, like, were well known and well documented. So, you know, like definitely like my dad's generation, you know, like had that stigma, you know, regarding anything in this medical realm where essentially where, you know, black people or any people of color become test subjects for some type of drug or whatever, and they didn't know, like, but it was a lot easier to do it among populations of color given the race and class element.
Yeah.
So, you know, so like you hear this shit in movies, but I think people are not necessarily making that connection. And this is what got me so infuriated regarding the pandemic, is because we have this history here and people did not, on purpose, I would argue, pay any mind to people who are kind of calling stuff like this back, like in relation to people were fearful of.
Oh, it's still tinfoil hat territory to even mention any of this, you know?
Right.
So, and the fact that the black community has become rightfully so paranoid of anything that we decide to push down our throats medically. I mean, the immediate response should be from them.
Oh, hell no.
Like,
right. It just makes me wonder, just given, you know, they're testing on drugs, and I'm sure this has been reported somewhere, but like the idea of the war on drugs in the 80s, if that connection is there, obviously, like,
you know, how it affected the global south.
People institutionalized and like, you know, basically chemically wired to want these drugs, and then they're sent out into the world, you know, having that, I don't want to say craving, but like
predisposition to these types of opioids,
and like,
and,
right, and then, you know, obviously being targeted by the police. So it's just. But yeah, again, I mean, we've done stories like this before, you know, in terms of, you know, it's the elites who seemingly are the people who have the intelligence that in a lot of ways are the most devious in terms of how they can really affect policy. But they're often
people should go look up a thing on the history of the Tower of London, right? Because humans are good at torturing other humans. That's kind of what we're good at.
Oh, yeah.
But the story of how that happens with the Queen of Mary and like this one Catholic priest who thought he was doing good, right? And converting people and whatever, who was ultimately torturing people indiscriminately, you know, that the what's the experiment? I think it's the Harvard or the Yale experiment, one of those where they had, you know, they gave like students essentially the power of authority to like injure their peers, something like that. Someone in chat will tell me what I'm talking about. You know, about humans once given power of any sort, whether that be through expert power base or, you know, just given authority outright, what they are willing to do to keep power and to keep people in line and keep control is endless. They are willing to do whatever they need to do. So, I mean, that's why, you know, you see that staff in this story go from staff to, you know, leaders in this field of torture themselves, you know.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean,
and it's basically it's like, you want to torture some folks, here you have the type.
Right. Yeah. You want to be a sadistic asshole? Here's the carte blanche to do that. I mean, psychology has kind of always has this in the background, right? You know, you can go back to the people who tortured children by showing them scary pictures and, you know, like there's some ethical shit in all of that, you know? So whatever, but you know, now we know apparently black people like crack. Who knew? Like that's the story, right? Like,
or as you said correctly, black people, I think, especially back then, were more likely predisposed to it.
Well, partially because who knew that being a politically active would end you in prison, and then they would call you crazy, and then give you drugs, and then the minute you get out, what are you gonna do? You know, so whatever. Speaking of institutional crazy, this guy.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, those of you who are new, or well, not new, well, it could be new. If you are, welcome. If you're now coming in, also welcome. Yeah. We missed you all. But that's Macron looking at us with the demon eyes.
Yeah.
You know, we see
laser eyes.
Means, and then the person to the back is Macron, not Macron, Modi.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'll say this: it's one thing when we have stories that you and I kind of pulled, like out of that we care about, that we resonate with, or whatever. This was a story that actually was pulled by one of our well, more specifically one of mine, but who I know mutually on Twitter. So, and actually, we've talked about this a lot. That's actually what we want. Yeah. Like, we want you guys to share with us stories that that you resonate with, that we're able to report on, because, you know, that's what we want to hear more of independent media, is your voices and the issues that you guys deal with in terms of, you know, what's happening and like policies that are affecting your communities and your countries. Like, you're not going to necessarily hear from mainstream media. So if you're able to share those stories with us, we would love it. So, so just kind of giving some context here with this story. So one of my mutuals, his name is Nuno. He's based out in Portugal. He actually posted this tweet over the weekend where he writes, India, the weakest link in BRICS, rejected the admission of Algeria into BRICS Plus at the behest of France. Modi, who visited France before the summit, signed weapons deals at marked up prices, and this. Modi is such a cuck, clearly making India the weakest of all BRICS nations. So he wrote that, and I saw it, and I was like, is there an article supporting this? Would love to report on this on 9 News this week. And of course, I'll give you credit.
So here's your credit.
And within 20 minutes, in the DMs, he gave me a receipt.
Cool.
So shout out to Nuno. This story is in your, and hopefully I will do it some justice. Here's the receipt that he sent to me. So this is from the cradle.co. India vetoed Algeria's BRICS Plus entry at France request report. So, according to this article, Algeria's long-awaited ascension to BRICS Plus failed to materialize last week during the bloc summit in South Africa, as Arabic media says India had used this veto against the North African nation at the request of France. Informed sources that spoke with Algeria's Desert Tube say French intelligence contacted their Indian counterparts ahead of the BRICS Plus summit to urge New Delhi into vetoing Algeria's entry into the bloc, describing the move as revenge for Algiers' growing influence in the Sahel region at the expense of France, and as a way to slow down burgeoning ties between Algeria and China. Tensions between Paris and Algiers spike after a military junta ousted French-backed government in Niger, in the latest example of a growing anti-West movement in the Sahel. Since then, Algeria has opposed an ECOWAS military operation in Niger, emphasized the role of diplomacy in bringing about a peaceful solution to the crisis, and refused permission for French military aircraft to fly over Algerian airspace.
Oh, look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay.
But it said it's not African American.
Whatever. Same difference.
The French plot took shape in the wake of a failed bid by President Emmanuel Macron to attend the summit in South Africa. India saw an opportunity in the request from Paris, as officials were reported offered Western help to fill the void left in former French colonies that had recently risen against neocolonial rule and extend its influence in the vital continent for BRICS Plus. While France has maintained close ties with successful Indian governments for decades, being the only European permanent member of the UN Security Council that supported India's nuclearization in 1998, their relationship has grown closer under Macron, who in 2019 supported India's position at the UN over occupied Kashmir and has sealed multiple defense agreements with the South Asian nation. In 2018, Macron declared during a visit to India that France must be India's best partner in Europe and its gateway to the European continent.
Colin, did you also see that the Vatican wanted to oversee these BRICS meetings recently?
I did not know that. I did not know that, actually.
So that's me and Lucy talked about it, and she was going at some people who were against it, and I was kind of like, yeah, the Vatican has always tried to position for best advantage,
right?
Like, and that's
Catholic
what this
Church,
is,
everyone,
right? Like, it doesn't matter who the Pope is; it could be a nice Pope, but we're talking. They want to continue to exploit the global South through their, religious
in
connection.
in the guise of religion,
right?
But
yes,
but as a proxy for neo.
It's also they've also always been connected to the global powers, including France, including Italy. Like, they literally are their own country. Keep that in mind.
Right.
The Vatican.
Well, just
counts.
Western Europe in general. Just Western Europe in general.
Yes, but I mean, the Vatican itself is its own government entity that wants to protect its own assets and resources. So a lot of which are in the global South. Hate to tell you.
Right.
Yes. So
anyway, nonetheless, India's veto against Algeria led to a dispute with China during the voting process, which reportedly almost caused the failure of the Johannesburg summit. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva also opposed Algeria's entry, according to Anadolu Agency.
Yep, which we
China
talked
sees
about
great potential.
Connections with him too, to the powers that be.
Right.
So
China sees great potential in the North African country joining BRICS Plus due to its massive fuel reserves, minimal national debt, and strategic location between Europe and sub-Saharan Africa. China is also funding the rehabilitation rehabilitation of the strategic port of El Hamina, as Algeria remains as a central part of the Belt and Road Initiative.
China.
Russia has similarly voiced its
you mean
support.
China also has fucking economic reasons for the Belt and Road Initiative, and it's not just okay. Just wanted to check on that. Cool. Good to know.
Russia has similarly voiced its support for Algeria's entry to the Global South Bloc, which last week formally invited Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and Ethiopia to join its ranks.
Interesting.
But while Algeria surpasses Ethiopia in the size of the economy and oil production and the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Egypt, and Ethiopia, in terms of the volume of gas exports, the country does not control any strategic water straits or host any major regional institutions.
Among the many African nations who are starting to get more oil production than some of these Middle Eastern places. We've covered that before.
Well, I did not pull this, but there is a pipeline, and this is part of where Nigeria also plays a role in this.
Yeah.
There's a pipeline that runs from Nigeria through Algeria.
Yes.
I think the majority of the pipeline runs through Algeria to Morocco and essentially Italy and Spain. So given its importance in terms of oil, I feel that's also part of the reason. Well, there's more to France and Algeria, which I'll get to after this part. But I'm sure that's also part of the reason why France was like, India, pull us a solid and say no. But I'll get more into that in a second.
I mean, from what I've seen here is that the countries that still have relations with Western powers, being China and India are getting some cold feet on some things.
Right.
Cool.
And Brazil.
Yes. All three of those.
Previous reports on why Algeria was left out in the cold have also pointed to the nation's dependence on oil and gas revenues, sometimes reaching 98% of the economy. The size of the economy was also questioned, as it amounted to about $192 billion in 2022, according to World Bank figures, while the country's growth rate falls just below the 5% threshold of BRICS Plus nations.
Well, we know there's some fucking numbering there.
Yes.
With regards to the World Bank, we've covered that directly.
Right. So I actually got curious, as I do, because, and again, we learn shit here. But first thought was for me, what's Algeria's connection to France? Given that it is a Francophone country. So what's their issue? So that's kind of where I started. I'll get into India later. But I wanted to play this short video that kind of talks about, it's a kind of cartoon, but it's short and kind of funny, but it kind of talks about Algeria and its relation to France, and why I think, as I said, potentially this was another reason why France was like, nah, don't let Algeria become a part of BRICS. So
cool.
When colonial powers grab territory, it usually stays separate from the lands of the metropole. India was a part of the British Empire but not a part of Britain. The Philippines were a part of the Spanish Empire but not Spain. But when the French first conquered Algeria, it wasn't long until it was incorporated into France proper. Not as a colony, but just as much a part of France as Normandy or Corsica. And given just how irregular this was, why did France do this? Why was Algeria a part of France itself and not a colony? So, as of 1827, this region was known as the Regency of Algiers, which officially was an Ottoman puppet state, but realistically it was independent. During the Napoleonic Wars, Algiers had provided food for Napoleon's armies, and 25 years later, its leaders were calling in the debt. France said no, tempers flared, and King Charles X blockaded the country to get its leaders to submit. They did not. This problem was timed well for King Charles, who was in a bit of trouble back at home, and so to divert attention away from him, he ordered the invasion of the region. The Algiers military was defeated quickly, but guerrilla-style resistance would carry on long afterwards. In case you're wondering, this expedition did little for Charles, since he would be gone soon afterwards, but his successor, Louis-Philippe, would oversee the conquest of these lands until 1848, which was a year in which, well, stuff happened. One of these stuff was when King Louis-Philippe was unkingified and the Second French Republic was proclaimed. A new republican constitution was drafted, which importantly proclaimed that these areas in Algeria were formerly a part of France. The primary reason for this was that the creators of the constitution were worried that the ongoing instability in France could end up losing them Algeria. They were concerned that either the Ottomans or another European power would make an attempt to take it from them, or that whoever was appointed to govern it may side against the government if there was another revolution. As such, it was divided into 3 administrative sections and made a formal part of the country. And you would expect that as an integral part of this new republic, the Algerians would be given the same rights as any other Frenchman, but fun fact, no. Despite being a part of France proper, citizenship was reserved for 2 groups. Those called the Pied Noirs, the descendants of French and European settlers, and in 1870, after Napoleon III reformed the government, Algeria's native Jewish population. There were 2 reasons for this. The first was money, since the Jewish...
So, you notice who became citizens in Algeria, right?
Yes, the white people.
The white people and the Jews.
Yes. Who are also near the Caucasus Mountains. I'll say that.
Right.
Right.
So, you know, so basically, and I'll go in, and I'm sure it's going to go, but basically, think of Algeria, think of it the equivalent to Quebec and Louisiana here in the States. So
very similar.
The idea, probably pretty much almost the same exact shit, is that the natives didn't have any rights, but the idea, like, Algeria was essentially a colony of France. So it was essentially France. And the idea was French people would go over to these colonies to supplant the natives. Well, in our case, in Quebec and Louisiana, to supplant the Native Americans living in those regions.
Well, I think it still affects things now, right? Like a former heavyweight champion of the UFC, Francis Ngannou, had to go from Nigeria to, I think, Algeria, so that he could get to France.
Right. Yes.
You know.
So it's still, I mean, there's still a lot of that stuff in effect, but like the idea basically was, you know, Algeria was essentially a colony of France and an extension of France, and the idea is that they wanted Frenchmen living there, to, you know, essentially create a France in Africa,
like how the British did India and South Africa and Australia.
So take
Empire.
any colonialist power, take any colonialist power, take any white people, put them anywhere in the global South. They become the majority, and essentially, so basically gentrifying the bitch. You know, so
cool. Brought those hipster coffee shops and everything. You know,
right? So just giving that context, but also again, this is why we kind of have to look at history, because
the
a lot of
hipster mustaches
kind of see. Right.
You know,
but again, but happened in Africa, this is exactly what happened in the States here. In terms of Quebec and Louisiana, same shit. But anyway,
Algerians would be expected to pay taxes to fund things like wars against.
But they'll still take your fucking taxes. Got it. Okay. Got to take your wheat, serfs.
Prussia. And second, by making hundreds of thousands of Algerians French, he gave them a stake in preserving French rule there, meaning that there would be allies if things ever got interesting. The Muslims of Algeria got nothing and were only considered to be French subjects. And they were, by and large, treated the exact same as the natives in any other French colony, like in neighbouring Tunisia or Morocco. So what changed? Well, the process of France losing Algeria was a slow one. There were no attempts to placate or help the native Muslims of the region until it became clear that there was a risk of losing Algeria for good. At first, it was believed that the ideals of the French Revolution and the superiority of French culture were so obvious that the native population would slowly but surely assimilate and become French themselves. Shockingly, this didn't happen, but after 2 world wars, the French population wanted to recognise the contributions of Algerians to the wars. Thus, in 1947, the French government gave citizenship and thus voting rights to Muslims in Algeria. Too late for any of that, though, since many of those living there wanted the French gone, and so it was time for war. The French fought incredibly hard to keep the colony, since it didn't want to abandon the idea of its civilizing mission, nor did it want to accept that it couldn't defend the French living in Algeria. The problem was that bullets don't care about your pride, and once the death toll started to rise, it became clear that France couldn't hold the territory. Numerous governments fell over the issue, and in the end it was only Charles de Gaulle, whose prestige allowed him to admit defeat and retain any popularity, that Algeria's position as a former part of France came to an end. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for watching, with a special...
So that's the deal with Algeria and France. So basically France is acting like the ex-boyfriend who wants to get revenge on his ex-girlfriend in terms of, you know, calling India a favor and basically being like veto against them becoming a part of BRICS, because even though they're not really, Algeria is now independent, it's still the idea of like how much worth that Algeria has to Europe, especially with the pipeline that's going right through their country. And I'm sure now, given that, you know, the West has put sanctions on Russia in terms of oil, that's something, you know, that, you know, France could exploit if they needed to, but also given its ties to Nigeria, again, with ECOWAS as well. So it's all connected, folks. That's why we do these things. So that kind of satisfied my curiosity regarding France and its relationship to Algeria, which honestly I should have known this from French classes in high school, but they don't teach you this kind of stuff or make that connection there. So as Nuno said, you know, like Modi was in France last 2 months ago. So I was like, why? And just looking at pictures, you know, just briefly online, they're chummy, like BFFs, basically. So I was like, all right, what's the deal with this? So
there's military like equipment.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, as you said, there's military deals that are being made with India and France for decades. So I pulled this last minute. This is an Al Jazeera article. And this is something I want to check.
Shout out to Al Jazeera recently for covering the Gray Zone's GoFundMe thing. That was good of them. They don't do that often.
Right.
So,
not going to read the whole thing, but I read enough of it that kind of talks about why this relationship, why the bromance between Modi and Macron. So Rifat Farid writes, military deals in focus as France rolls out red carpet for Modi. So just to give you some context, Modi he was present at their Bastille Day celebrations back in July, just to give you some context in that. So, there we go. So analysts say that while France and India have differing positions on the Russian-Ukraine war, we know that France is for it, India is against it, basically. These views are unlikely to impact the foundations of their relationship. Janoy Joshi, a senior analyst at the New Delhi-based Observer Research Foundation, told Al Jazeera that the visit will focus on India-France ties, and it's not really aimed at the European situation, Ukraine, I guess. The difference between the Indian position and that of France is well known and is unlikely to be an issue, Joshi said. France strongly supports Ukraine, has sent military aid to Kyiv while pressuring Russian President Vladimir Putin to stop the conflict. By contrast, India has maintained a publicly neutral stance and snapped up Russian oil. Even with that, now, this is what Nuno told me based on what he spoke he actually spoke to Indians living there in India right now to kind of verify this. Oil in India, like according to the petrol prices there, they've plateaued. Yeah, they've been pretty low. But Russia has been making bank out of oil. So the question is, where's the profit going? Because the Indian people are not necessarily benefiting from that. So basically Modi is pocketing it for his donors basically in India. So and again, we hope to have Nuno come and talk about this because he said he wanted to do more of a write-up on this. And I tried to get more information to kind of climb that
Make a
on my own,
Substack, dude. We got you.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, so I already told him that. I said, write Substack, will report you and even better try and get you one. So, but he's been ill, so feel better because he's been in the hospital. But yeah, we hope to get you on soon to kind of speak more onto this since you've been studying this for a while. But anyway, even so, Joshi said Modi's visit will boost the pair's relationship. France has a view of strategic autonomy, which is much like that of India. As for the defense industry, again, with the relationship is old, and India is seeking to move it now from arms transfer and co-development to joint development of weapons and systems. As for France, Joshi believes Paris is looking to India as an important market for its high-tech industry. On Thursday, the Indian body in charge of approving military acquisition gave a nod to the procurement of 26 Rafale fighter aircraft from France. India's defense ministry added that the Defense Acquisition Council also gave an initial approval to the purchase of 3 additional Scorpion-class submarines. India has been purchasing French military gear for decades, and the new deals are reportedly worth about $10 billion. Indian security experts say defense acquisitions allow New Delhi to diversify its military hardware partners and reduce its dependency on aging Russian military equipment. So basically, it sounds like
they don't want the old stuff; they want new stuff.
Right, new, more high tech.
Yes. Yep.
From 2018 to 2022, France emerged as India's second largest arms supplier, accounting for 29% of imports, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Parv Satam, a foreign policy expert and editor of Eurasia Times, told Al Jazeera that unlike the United States, France will not try to persuade India to turn on Russia or pressure Modi to take a harder line on Moscow. France knows India will stick to its neutral stance, and a joint statement, if there is one after PM Modi and President Macron meet, might not see a reference to Ukraine. India's individual statement will also continue to refer to the war as the Ukraine conflict. Satam said India is likely seeking greater French participation in defense programs that involve manufacturing in India. So that's where it goes right there.
Yep.
This includes localization of manufacturing defense aerospace components and devices, he said. Such deals deliver greater benefits to Indian industry in terms of job creation and access to advanced military scientific technology. France is not willing to make such deals, he added. According to Christophe Chaffrelot, professor of Indian politics and sociology at King's India Institute, the ties between India and France are dominated by security objectives. In the India Express, he wrote, official narratives do emphasize structural affinities to such democratic like-mindedness, but what matters are more common security-related interests. Another area in which India and France align on is China, Jaffrelot said, explaining that while Macron is concerned with Chinese expansionism, India is equally worried about the growing influence of China in its neighborhood. So, yeah. So basically, as I said, there's a lot more that goes into this regarding Modi and how he's establishing as hell, authoritarian as hell, and, you know, like, doing everything on part of the West, while and I say seemingly, because again, Nuno said to me, like, in India, they haven't even talked about the BRICS conferences at all on their mainstream media. If anything, they're talking about the G20 summit that is going to take place next week. I forgot where, but anything regarding BRICS has not been mentioned in India at all. And So like I said, we definitely want to get Nuno on to kind of give more light into what's happening in India. But basically, they're like Modi has one foot basically riding the fence between, seemingly kind of doing the right thing in terms of being part of BRICS, but also being at the hand of Macron and the West in terms of, and I'm sure like with Pakistan also, I think that's also part of that issue too, given that Pakistan is its neighbor and they don't do so hot. But yeah, there seems to, as someone said earlier, that there seems to be the mega powers in BRICS do not seem to be working in full support of the intent of BRICS, that they still have their hand in Western interests, which I don't know. It can make, this looks bad, essentially, or it worries me in terms of what the future of BRICS Plus will be, in terms of having these interests that are not necessarily aligned with the global South.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
so
I agree.
It's
and with that, and you see the Vatican trying to get in on this. You see other countries trying to, at least if it's like, if you can't beat them, you might as well join them. Like, you might as well figure out how to work with them. So
right, yeah, and that's funny. Like in one of the threads that I'm in, because someone asked that Nico answered, like, is there a possibility that France will join BRICS? And
sure,
Nico said, maybe, like maybe not now, but down the road, sure. Which almost defeats the purpose of having BRICS at all.
Yeah, but it depends on who are they trying to compete with?
Right, but then again, like in thinking about it, that might make sense if France continues to lose a lot of its colonial ties in West Africa, in particular, in terms of the exports that they're able to obtain from them in Nigeria and Mali, and I would say that Algeria is part of this too.
Yeah,
it could very well be that they may end up being in BRICS just in a way to kind of sustain what they had or losing.
Right.
In terms of the
if it grants them more,
Africa,
if it grants them control of these resources in any capacity, they'll take it. Like France, like whatever. If it's that or no more uranium. Like, so.
And then with
anyway.
India, with India, real quick, just the idea of like taking care of itself. But again, according to Nuno, like the working class in India are not benefiting from any of this at all. So, like I said, I want him to speak more on this. So I hope we're able to get him so he's able to kind of share more. Because but India is basically going through some shit as well. So but again, shout out to you, Nuno. Thank you for your work on this. Write that Substack article, dude.
We'll keep in touch. Well, I wanted to end us out here with a bit of notes from Caitlin.
Fun story.
Yeah.
Fun story.
So have you ever read one of the notes from the narrative matrix from Caitlin? It's a kind of a format she does, which I think is very digestible for people. It's really easy to actually go read yourselves, because I'm not going to do it every week, but she literally does these frequently. So like, go to her website, bookmark it, check in, right? But these are essentially, I feel like it's like stories that Caitlin couldn't put together into a big story. So she just kind of throws them all together.
So these are like just journal notes that you might write.
Almost, yeah.
Just random thoughts, kind of.
So access journalism at its most pernicious. Modern Western national security journalism is mostly just writing what a government official tells you to write and then calling it a scoop, which you got from a nameless source in the government. Okay, so this is on September 5th, so literally yesterday. So this is the first little segment from the notes on this. So is what she has this title under. So modern Western national security journalism is mostly just writing what a government official tells you to write, calling it a scoop, which you got from a nameless source in the government. New York Times editors changed a recent headline from, quote, "As Ukraine's fight falters, it gets even harder to talk about negotiations," okay, to, "As Ukraine's fight grinds on, talks of negotiations becomes nearly taboo." So that's the two differences, right? Apparently, for no other reason than because grinds on advances the information interests of the U.S. empire better than falters.
Right.
A lot of propaganda.
We want to show that we're working towards winning versus losing.
Losing, right. So a lot of propaganda emphasis goes into crafting headlines because the vast majority of people only read the headline. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, we see this on YouTube. Like, that's why you might see, you know, like capitalized text on videos, like with the verb, like
me and Collin have made it a point.
Reef destroys, you know, whatever, you know, like.
So we make it a point
like,
to read the whole article. We read the whole article on air. I know it's long. I know it takes us a while, especially for longer articles. But otherwise, none of you would read it. No, like nobody else would read it.
You would hear about it. Otherwise,
so
or there might be some information that you miss, if
which
you don't
is why,
get the full context.
If you want that, you can come here, and we'll read it to you like good little bedtime stories. So as Ukraine fights crying, so only the headline of a news story and not the body of the text. If your interests are in propaganda and narrative control rather than news reporting, headlines are where your focus lie.
Again, see that on YouTube all the time, even in our space.
Modern Western national security, literally, modern Western national security journalism is mostly just writing what a government official tells you to write and then calling it a scoop you got from a nameless source in the government. She's put this in here multiple times. It's important. So one of the many problems with this system of news reporting is that it gives the government a tremendous amount of leverage over mass media outlets, because if the New York Times or CNN don't write what a government agency or official wants them to write, they can lose access to that source and all the scoops that come with it. I said in a conversation with Indy about this yesterday, that goes both ways. That the CIA also doesn't want to lose its access to these agencies. So they are willing to give them a story or two, right? So that they can continue this quid pro quo. Quid pro yo. Quid pro yo. If the New York Times started doing actual journalism and closely scrutinizing the U.S. intelligence cartel, for example, the CIA could just decide that the New York Times is now off limits and all the insider scoops go to different outlets instead. The New York Times would then immediately lose prominence while someone else gains it, and they lose all the clicks and subscriptions that they were getting from being a consistent source of breaking news on that front. Correct? Which is why that never happens. A symbiotic relationship that has been created in which news outlets benefits from powerful sources and powerful sources benefit from uncritical news reporting. I swear I just said this. The news outlet reports what they're told to report in order to keep their steady supply of scoops, and in exchange they get all the money and prestige that go with it. The government gets uncritical regurgitation of talking points which serve the information interests of the Western Empire in the moment. Again, that's squid froyo. This is access journalism at its most pernicious. Access journalism is destructive enough when it's a prominent official refusing to give interviews to unsympathetic reporters. Cough, Kennedy cough. But once you get entire government agencies driving the entire news media information, you know, Max Blumenthal, he does some stuff on Palestine. Maybe you should sphere by determining who does and does not receive scoops on foreign conflicts and international affairs. You've got a system of straight up state propaganda, Care Bear, as we know so well. So that's where Miss Caitlin is on Access Journalism.
Wait, you missed the slide.
I know, it's her next bit of notes.
Okay.
So but I just want to get your take on that one before you go to the other ones. So,
okay. So there's a few parts to it. Yeah. I mean, I mean, you can make the case for independent media as well.
Yep.
Most
definitely can.
And we were off for 2 weeks, but Reef and I and Indy have been talking a lot over the last few weeks, like just in terms of, I think, how frustrated we are in terms of, and that's not necessarily the fault of you guys watching, but I think what independent media and the big reason why I started doing this is because I want to help elevate voices that are not otherwise heard.
Yep.
That includes you guys. That includes, the people that we've been
through the propaganda.
Right. But to give you guys other options in terms of where to find articles if you do read them, but like giving you alternative opinions in terms of what mainstream media would force feed you. And we've done it here, like even the best of what we read in terms of, outlets that we like sometimes also get it wrong. They also kind of bring in that mainstream talking points as well, which I think especially has debunked even in the last few weeks. Yep. But what I feel independent media has become is more or less like riding the coattails of certain personalities, in terms of viewership and clicks and subs and all that kind of stuff.
It's listening to react versus understanding. I think that's my
understanding and learning and actually taking action on shit.
When it's like for me, it's become with traumatic anything, like my go-to is when dealing with trauma, I seek understanding. Because if I don't understand what's happening, I can't fix the problem. Right?
Right.
So that goes with all of this. Like our entire life and existence is a traumatic one right now. So trying to figure out and understanding what is actually happening, which you can only do by like listening to understanding and finding the sources you can actually do that with. So, we're going to try to bring you that and sort through it ourselves so that you don't have to do as much work. But, but that's why you're here for our little journey. But, Caitlin has a bit more. So if you've not done notes from a narrative before, this is essentially like, it's another, when you see these stars or whatever, it's a new subject, right? So literally this was just this paragraph. Instead of literally going to war with Mexican cartels, has anyone considered simply not having a shit-brained and completely unscientific drug policy that has been in continuous state of failure since its inception? End of sentence. That's like one sentence from Caitlin. And then she's like, all right, I got that out. Good. So here's another little section from her. It's silly to let yourself be pulled from the left to the right. Mainstream liberals are pathetic, and the authentic socialist left, communist left, whatever you want to call them. I mean, she means socialist left, can be aggravating as fuck, but the values which drew you to the left in the first place are still grounded in deep truth and just as valid as ever. Other people on the left and pseudo-left being obnoxious doesn't magically invalidate the world's need for peace, justice, and equality. Your disagreements and grievances with a given political faction don't magically cancel out the urgent need to end capitalism and imperialism. Don't let the failings of other people and the general confused state of our species cause you to lose sight of your healthy vision for this world that got you interested in politics in the first place. Very poignant from Caitlin, I feel. So, I mean, I feel like we've said these exact things before as well. So, here's another little section that she did. It's probably worth noting that Ukraine was always just one of the multiple fronts in which the U.S. empire was dangerously provoking and escalating against Russia as part of the new Cold War. There was also Syria, the NATO military buildup in the Baltic region, shredded treaties, sanctions, and increasingly aggressive nuclear posture reviews. Much of this under the Trump administration, interestingly enough. Keep in mind, the late Stephen Cohen was urgently warning about these multi-front escalations years before the Ukraine war. Quote, we're at maybe the most dangerous moment in U.S. relations in my lifetime and maybe ever, Cohen told who, everyone? The Young Turks in 2017. And the reason is that we're in a new Cold War by whatever name. We have 3 Cold War fronts that are fraught with the possibility of hot war. In the Baltic region, where NATO is carrying out an unprecedented military buildup on Russia's border. In Ukraine, where there's a civil and proxy war between Russia and the West. And of course, in Syria, where Russian aircraft and American warplanes are flying in the same territory. Anything can happen, he told the Young Turks in 2017. Okay? So if they're acting like they don't know better, they're lying. Okay? We were headed towards some kind of horrific confrontation between Russia and the empire, no matter what. Ukraine just happened to be the one that landed first. Moscow was always going to draw a line somewhere. So that's all she had to write. So a little quick, easily digestible, couple of paragraphs, you know, nice succinct things for people to go read. Thoughts on any of those last ones, Care Bear? So you're like, no, awesome. She wrote it. She did the thing.
She did the thing. But I'm not sure if I'm necessarily a fan of that. I get, like, it just seems like for her, like a stream of consciousness that she's writing down, kind of. Not sure if I'm a fan of that format, considering what I'm more used to her, though.
Yes.
So
I think that's my thing with it, is that, like, I don't do them often because of that, but occasionally I think it might be, you know, like they're good little things to react to for, like, you know, I don't know, if you're another outlet looking for content and you need nice, short, punchy things, those are great. So, you know, but anyway, I think that's it.
Before we go, Dr. Nick asked, and I want to ask you, because I'm sure people will be asking us anyway, our take on the West. Well, are we going to provide a take? I think we can kind of say it clear here. More than likely, no. We're not going to provide our own take.
Yeah, I just don't care enough, mainly. You know?
Well, let's rephrase. It's not that we don't care about it. It's almost in line of what Kaylin just wrote about.
Right.
It's the idea of, like, that's going to be what's the main thing that's going to be talked about for the next 2 weeks. Okay? Yep. You don't need to hear us and our opinion. I think if you know us,
you could take guesses.
Know you can probably take educated guesses as to what we think, you know.
And if it gets to a bigger story about it, we might have to, but you know.
Right. But our general rule of thumb, and this is something that Reef and I have committed to, you know, on this show, like, the reason why that we believe that you guys show up, that also might be also the reason why we're not as big as we would like to be. But that's not to say that's not an issue for us. We definitely want to grow, but we want to be authentic in terms of talking about stuff that you guys may not necessarily know. And that's what we're kind of committed to. You don't need to hear our take on these trending issues when you're going to hear it from other
I'll tell you this,
because
electoralism in any capacity is not what we feel like is necessary to cover as much.
Right. Because even, look, and I'll say this just off the gate, and not to say this will be the only time, because I've said this in various ways in the past, but as we said, electoral politics is not going to be the thing that will save us. Banking on a politician or politician-like figure to try and save you is not going to save us. What will save us is your engagement in terms of what you're doing locally and how you're pushing for those things in terms of any policy, especially if it's like maybe national policy, how you're able to use that in terms of pushing things for yourself in your communities where you have the most direct control. If you're able to do that, and if you're if you're able to kind of utilize a lot of that energy into the local level, that's one thing, and we'll be glad to report on that. And I think generally we do that. But to talk about these issues in a vacuum, just as a way to kind of get that engagement, and then I just feel like the whole message of what we should be doing is lost. Because even if Cornel West, and the reality is Cornel West is not going to be president. And I'm just going to say that off the top of my head. And just for me personally, I'm not sure if I'm going to like vote for him like in the general election. I mean, we're still a year out. So there's no rush for me to make that decision at this time. You know, I just want to see how things go.
And like, sure, like my vote is a throwaway regardless of who I put it on. So I might as well throw it to someone who I think at least can do something given a particular percentage is got. But having said that, I don't even know if that's going to be the case with, I don't even know if he's going to be able to do that. You never know what the Green Party is capable of doing. Right. You know, there's a lot of time between now.
We talked about this on this show. There's a lot of issues within the Green Party that I've criticized them for. Like, I really feel like they should have been more active, you know, in terms of the 2020 election, you know, galvanizing their base, because people are just so looking for an alternate party that the Green Party should have been doing more work. And their leadership has been shit, you know?
Yeah.
And there's also the issue of Howie Hawkins, who still allegedly is the leader of the party. You know, Cornel West now has not mentioned this, and I'm not sure anyone in independent media has asked, okay, what's the deal with you and Hawkins? Is Hawkins willing to step down in order for him to get the Green Party nomination? We don't know.
Well, and the other thing is that Cornel is just frankly too nice. Like, that turning the other cheek thing ain't gonna work no more. It's time to flip tables, homie. Like, you know, I feel you, but, you know.
As a person who studied theology in college, and fun fact, for a while I thought about being a priest, hence that. But being a teacher, which is similar, but being a teacher I get the idea of, you know, speaking in terms of that pastor, minister, you know, theological standpoint of caring for each other and all that kind of stuff. I definitely believe in that. And I think ultimately that's what we should be doing. But as a politician, though, you got to go for the jugular. Like, you got to make your case as to what the issues are, you know, what the root issues are that is making the working class lives a living hell in this country. And what do you propose you're going to do in order to make their lives a little better and fight for those things? Like, what is your plan to make our lives a little better? And even after all of that, if you're not able to kind of account for the system that we're currently in, you know, with the corporate interests, you're not going to get anywhere. And that so far, I haven't heard Cornel West speak to that yet. So that in all worries me. So I think ultimately we kind of discussed this interview. We haven't watched it yet, and really, for all intents and purposes, we probably are not going to watch it.
Good for Jimmy for being critical, though. That's important. I wish he would do that to a few others. But you know, I get it.
But that's just not our thing at INN News. Like, you might hear other, you know, our colleagues talk about it, and they have the right to do so within the network. Reef and I are not necessarily into that, and that's something we've mutually agreed upon when we started this.
We try to deal with those with power.
People,
they don't got power yet, so so they do.
We want to stick with stories that we're able to connect to you. We want to bring stories that are able to make you think. And like, if we have to read like a 45-minute article, like we're going to do it if it means that you're able to learn something and maybe make connections to what is happening around the world is also connected to the issues that are happening here. That's what we're committed to.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, I'm sure their book sales will do well, so I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
we're
back.
This week, what do we got? Thursday is Bread and Circuses
with Chris at 9.
Yep.
Angel in the afternoon on Friday at 12:30. Tara Reid at 3.
We got. I think. Oh, yeah, I think. Hold on. Yeah, I got to scroll down my soundboard to get to here. We got Angel Thursday, right? 12:30. Friday, 12:30.
Friday. Yeah. Tara at 3.
Yes. 3 p.m.
Right on Friday, and then Saturday.
Everything goes well.
With
Bitch
at 8, and so Sunday. How do we miss that? Taking a little bit of a break for the next month. So in place of that is
you'll see nobody wants to work anymore with Indy instead. So I don't know about boats. We're gonna try to figure that out.
Shout out to Snow Himbo. He's a officially new member of the network. So shout out to Snow Himbo. Very happy that he's a part of our crew. You guys got to know him. He's great. Follow him on Twitter at Snow Himbo. We love him. And
if I do boats, it'll be Friday at like 10. I might not even be able to do it with Andy, but I'll see what can happen. But whatever. I know people enjoy that, so
and then
give it a shot.
Buy our merch.
Yeah. Is that in the next
slide?
Yeah, this
there
one.
We go.
Yeah, go
merch.
To indienews.shop.
Christmas is coming.
Plenty of stuff.
Christmas is coming.
If you're on the YouTubes, look right down below, like when this video's a video, and it'll be right down there. Might even be right down there
buy
now.
Buy a tank top. Like Jesse's tank top. And
buy a shirt.
Post with it on Twitter. He will love it.
Buy a mug.
So.
Spend, consume. But
as
anyway,
I said, Christmas is coming, so holidays are coming.
So
dude, they're already starting selling Christmas shit already. So
yep. We got to go through Halloween first. Spooky season is upon us. But anyway, I feel like we should make some merch for that. Some like the spookiest of spookies. Like our politicians on something. I'll figure it out. But anyway,
right.
I think that's it. Anything we're missing?
No,
like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. Please.
Do
Special
all the
thanks
things. Love
to
us.
our supporters right down there. You see them. They're YouTube members. They're Patreon members. That's where you can really help us out, I feel like. So we appreciate that your monthly donations are appreciated.
And sacrifices are well appreciated. We know you could spend your money on
I know
other things.
commitment is hard for people.
But,
So
we don't ask you money, but we definitely ask your time and your grace.
Yep.
And again, thank you guys for your graciousness for us in the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
We definitely needed, definitely Reef especially, because shout out to Reef who has done every single Island News episode since we started, has not taken a break. Well, last week he was forced to, but So, you know,
Whatever.
I've taken a few more, but you guys have been really supportive of us, and we love you guys for it. And we hope we can grow this community. But yeah, love your support, and thank you guys for checking in.
I think
we love you all.
That's it for us. As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.